Today we'll talk about limiting player pools. It's something we went over last season. If you saw some of the lineup reviews and player spotlights from last season, player spotlights where we go over other pro players and their lineups, you saw that some of these guys have a very condensed player pool. And I'm going to show you how I do that. If you took a listen to the pod this morning, you kind of have an idea of how I do it, but I'm going to show you guys on FC how I actually go through with this. And then I'm going to show you what I do with ownership. I think ownership is a, and I wanted to give you kind of like a different view. I'm going to see if I can give you a different view on how I kind of work ownership into NBA. NBA is one of those sports where we don't stack, right? So we got to do everything in our will with what we have to create the best possible lineups, obviously. So for me, it's different in the sense that I don't really. I don't try to force stacks. No one should. But we do play around with salary, point per dollar value, whatever it is, and ownership. Those are the things we need to focus on the most. I say this all the time when I talk about DFS. Manny, do you think DFS is a skill game? Well, yeah, I think it's a skill game because there is salary involved. If there was no salary and we could all just pick LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, AD as our lineup every day, we would, So I do think there is some sort of skill involved, and because salary is what makes a skill, I think we should take a deeper look at point per dollar or whatever, right? So many do something like this, right? If they say I need at least 20 points from every person in my lineup, you will go down and say, well, here's the 20 Rondo's projected at 20, and we're just using these random projections, right? If you were to use FC projections, we'll say Rondo's projected at 20, anyone under this would be gone, right? Anyone under this would be gone. I don't want any of these guys in my lineup. And this is how you would kind of take out everyone from below, right? So it seems cool on the surface, but there's still some flaws to this, right? Because let's just say, and I'm going to sort by value, right? Let's say you really like any random person down here. Contavious Caldwell-Pope, right? Let's say, or you want Terrence Davis. Someone mentioned Terrence Davis earlier. Let's say you want one of these guys down here, right? Because if you look at value, dude, he's dude, I'm like searching. He's minimum salary. This just because he's projected at 17 doesn't mean he's a bad play. And then obviously if he ends somewhere towards the top end of his, projection range, then you can get really good value out of Terrence Davis. So just blindly say anyone under 20 it should not be in my pool, that's actually wrong, and I don't believe in that. I think you're going to leave a few good value guys out, okay? I think you're going to leave a few good value guys out. In order to get some of the Terrence Davis, Contavious, Shamitz, whoever you want down here that are below 20, it wouldn't necessarily be projection, but what about value, right? And I want to, if you were, so I'm not assuming all of you limit your pools, but if you were to limit pools and you sort by value, I think this gives you a better understanding of who should be in or not. It's not by ceiling. No, it's actually not by ceiling. Because essentially what I want is not just a bunch of I do want high ceiling guys, but you can't really just say, oh, I'm only playing guys with high ceilings, because again, someone that's 3K, say the same example, Contavious or whoever, doesn't have a huge ceiling, but doesn't mean he's a bad play if he was closer to minimum salary, right? So that really isn't the answer either. And when you look at value, all value is telling you is value in FC is another way of saying point per dollar, right? According to his projection and how much he costs, what's his value, right? For me, using point per dollar is just much better, only because you can still have all your 3K guys, your 4K guys, all the way to your high-end guys, right? If you want to play LeBron, AD, Kawhi, whoever. So the next question by default would be, Manny, what do you consider a threshold if you're looking at value or point per dollar, right? So for me, I think it's all relative to the slate, right? Relative to a 2-game slate, you can't say anyone under 5 will not be in my pool because you're going to have like a 20-person pool, right? Or a 15-person pool. That doesn't make sense. But on a 10-game slate, you can say maybe anyone under 5, right? 5 meaning 5 points per every 1,000. Maybe you could do something under 5. Maybe you could do 4.5, 4.7. Maybe you could do 4 flat because you want a bigger pool. Maybe you're playing in one of these super gablooper mega tournaments that has a million entries and you feel getting really different and having things go your ways. Whatever the case is, it all depends on you and how much risk you want, right? So my rule of thumb was like anyone around 4.5 on normal slates. And this is my recommendation, of course. You could do whatever you want. It's up to you. Anyone under 4.5 maybe on normal slates, 7, 8, 9, 10 gamers, you just kind of eliminate those guys out of your pool. Listen, if you're doing things the right way, here's another thing. If you're doing things the right way, these guys won't come out anyway. Let's say, because we did this last year and we saw, so we went back and forth on a lot of things that came up with ownership, right? Whether how much ownership is too much ownership, whether we should use exposure sum. We dabbled with, using the product, right? Like multiplying ownerships to see how many duplicates you'd possibly have in an X amount of entry tournament. We've done everything. And if you want to go back and see all of those, again, FantasyCruncher.com/videos, you'll see them all. For those of you that haven't read, by the way, I recommend this to everyone. For those that haven't read Osimo's new article, him speaking himself, Alex Baker, and I think it has to be him writing this because he shows all his profit and loss over years in specific sports, specific game types or whatever. And in one of them, he has an ownership part, right? And he talks about exposure sum and I think using products to tell how unique a lineup is, right? And I think the second part is a little more important because that obviously shows you a lot more than, say, an exposure sum would. Obviously, in typical Alex Baker fashion, he doesn't give you exactly his process. He would never. I wouldn't either, but it's a very, very good article, and I advise everyone to read that. I believe it's free. I believe anyone can read it. Essentially, what he's looking for, and he goes on to explain it in the article, is a lineup that's not too owned, but also very unique, with projection, like a projection that's in the top 10%. It seems like it's all very hard to put together, and if you try to just do this all through FC or all through in your brain, if you're making it by hand or whatever, however you make lineups, it's going to be really difficult, right? I guess that's where the art of being a good GPP player comes from, right? To kind of put this all together and make the very best lineups that will give you the best ROI going forward. And that's essentially how we want to use ownership. So just blindly setting min-max, I can already tell you is not going to work. I kind of hinted at that last season. I don't know why people were still trying that. And I got DMs till the very last day of NBA saying, what is min, what is max? I'm like, just keep going. Keep going with your day. Like, you don't need to know. Just keep going. I think we see chalk. We see that 3K guy that's coming in off an injury, and all we do is, there's no way he can fail. Lock in Terry Rozier at 4K. Sure, that works. But there's going to be days where it doesn't work, and the payoff for that is much greater than when you played Rozier. It did work, but so did everyone else, right? Let's say this is the order of which everyone's owned, right? And essentially you want to eliminate all the high-owned guys and say, let's say from here on down, these guys are 10% owned, right? That's exactly what I'm doing, Sequel, because there's a bunch of you that try this. Essentially, you want to make a group with all the sub 10%ers. You would then go here. You'd add all the ones that are checkmarked to create a new group. We're going to create the group called sub 10, just to make pretend that's 10. Must use at least 2 or whatever. Must use 2 of these guys in every single one of your lineups. So then when you checkmark everyone again, new cool feature, lol. You would then go and then it'll use at least 2 of the low-owned guys that you had in there. I've seen a lot of you ask me this in DMs or whatever, and that seems okay. I don't have any problem with that. If that's the way you find the best way of incorporating some low-owned guys into your lineup, sure, right? And then if you wanted to still use some sort of a minimum, that way you're not using, because at least you're losing 2. But what if your calculations give you 3 or 4, some sub 10% owned guys, and then you only have 1, even chalky dude? I think you might be going too suboptimal, maybe. So for me, it's, can you use even a minimum ownership with this combined with using some low owned players? Sure. Why not? I just say don't get too cute, man. Don't get too cute. Everyone who's by default 40 to 60 in ownership, you hear people say, oh, fade. Oh, just fade. Oh, he's 50% owned, fade. Like, they don't even look at anything else and just automatically fade because the number is big, right? You can still play chalky players. Right? Just know that you have to be different elsewhere, right? Essentially, we're going for unique builds, unique lineups, unique construction. If you want to use a 50% owned or 60% owned Kyle Lowry, you can. Just know that the rest of your lineup has to differentiate from all the other Kyle Lowry lineups. And there's a lot of Kyle Lowry lineups if he's going to be 60 to 70% owned, right? So how different do you have to get? Yeah, you got to get pretty different. Essentially, what I want to find out is, and you could see this through here. Let me see if I can. I think this is how much he played. Number of players used in lineups. Okay, 52. That's a pretty healthy number. Anywhere from 40 to 50, I think, is pretty healthy, right? There's guys who like going to 87. I think that's too much. 70, 75, 107. Look at the sea of red when you spread yourself out like this. Dude in first had 25. It's a really projectable sport. Why we're going to play 107 different players. This is exactly what's going to happen to you. You're going to have 4 cashing out of your 55 entries. Wait, he had 107 players in 55 entries? What the? How is that even possible? $12 uniques. What? How on earth? That's a way to not take risks, I suppose. Yeah, but okay, so in a sport with a lot of short-term variance, maybe this works. Not in NBA. No. That's the wrong move, man. 500 randomness. This is literally every single player on the slate, I think. Okay, if we go back to score, I'd rather just stick with Yuta. I think he's much better. Yuta used 52, by the way, and he did play 150. So he used half of the players the other guy did and played 100 more lineups than he did. If I were to look at Siakam's ownership, 34, he had him 100. Bledsoe's ownership was 43, he had him. So if you know his play style, he really is not scared of playing the chalk, but he also will combat that with, players that are extremely low owned to get the difference makers or to make his lineup different, right? Imagine a 3,900 Siakam. Now that we know what he could do, right? Imagine 3,900 for this cat. Anyway, most of these chalky lineups, you'll see exactly what he did, right? He also had Middleton, who was 47. Played Middleton about 64 here, right? This is the 29th. You see it on the top right here, October 29th. He played a 5% owned Clay, or 6% owned Clay, 10% owned Cat, 5% owned Gary Harris, right? So it's exactly what I'm talking about. You can still play all the chalky players you want. You just have to find a way to make that lineup different. And he was able to do that, right? He was able to make it unique by playing a 5%er. And if you want to go back and see just how different it was, go here and look at the dupes. All dupes is duplicates. How many people in the tournament duplicated his lineup also? Nobody. He was the only person. He was the only person for this one. He had 4 in this one. But as you can see, kind of expected because he didn't use the lower owned guys in this lineup. Kyle Lowry 30. He had one guy at 6, but Jimmy at 20, Siakam at 34, Illy at 33, Bledsoe at 43, Mirotic at 30, and Holiday at 49. There was no way he was going to be different. And just using one 5%er, 6%er in Clay wasn't going to make you completely different, right? So you have 4 duplicates. He was able to have a pretty good mixture of chalk and low-owned guys that were able to keep him unique in tournaments and obviously have an edge. This is one of the reasons, and you're right, whoever said this, where percentage owned, sorry, I hit my dog. Percentage owned doesn't matter individually, really. It's more the combination, right? Because I can still use the high-owned guys. There's nothing, just because they're high-owned doesn't mean they're bad plays. Right? Doesn't mean they're bad plays. Just, can I make the build unique? And that's what you should be going for.